$15 million in the Yukon isn't a statistic, it's a heartbeat. It's the sound of diesel at dawn and silence when the mercury falls. Parker Schnabel didn't wander into Dominion Creek looking for a comfortable season. He walked into a storm with a target so big it made the ground feel smaller under his boots. The clock started the second he signed. Short weather window, tight margins, and a mountain of overburden sitting on top of rumor, history, and possibility. There was no soft landing here. Either the plant ate and the ounces stacked, or the ledger wrote an ugly ending. The part that keeps people watching isn't just the metal. It's the decision to move forward when stepping back would have been safer. And it's the tension of not knowing whether this was a blind leap or a move he'd been engineering for years. Before that final cleanup, the story looked like a coin flip. By the end, it felt like a blueprint. But getting there meant fighting ground, time, and doubt every single day. And this season proved that the difference between a gamble and a plan is execution. The only way to see the truth is to rewind to the moment the old ground stopped feeding and the new ground started testing his nerve. But that wasn't the whole story, because the real pressure started before the first bucket even moved. Every great claim has an expiration date. Scribner Creek put numbers on the board and built a reputation for clean systems and relentless pace. But geology does not care about resumes. The pay streak thinned, and the consistency that once felt guaranteed turned into a scavenger hunt for the next patch of decent gravel. This is the part casual viewers miss. When an operation reaches that crossroads, it's not just about finding new ground. It's about deciding what kind of leader you want to be. One path tells you to shrink, cut machines, cut people, cut expectations. The other path demands you scale up into uncertainty. Parker chose the second path and accepted everything that came with it. Bigger invoices, bigger logistics, bigger risk. Dominion wasn't a spontaneous idea. It was the logical, if brutal, answer to a simple problem. How do you keep a high-output operation alive when the old engine is coughing? You buy ground with potential and then force potential to show up. That meant cash up front, contracts for fuel that would make anyone else dizzy, parts on order weeks in advance, and a crew large enough to keep a plant humming around the clock. People love the hero shot of a big machine dumping into a hopper. They don't see the spreadsheet math that turns a slow hour into lost ounces. Downsizing would have been easy. No one would blame a miner for pulling back when the ground goes thin. But the identity of this outfit isn't built on comfort. It's built on pushing when slowing down would feel responsible. When Dominion came into focus, the bet wasn't about ego. It was about survival at scale. The choice said everything. Either become a smaller version of yourself or step into a number so large it scares you straight. He picked the number. Even that decision wasn't enough, because the ground has a way of testing intentions with physics and cold. Dominion Creek had a reputation long before the first truck rolled. Everybody knew there was metal in it. Everybody also knew it hid under a lid of overburden thick enough to sink lesser operations. Picture yards of frozen muck stacked like a concrete cap. Before a single ounce can be recovered, that lid has to go. Layer after stubborn layer. That's fuel, labor, and time, all spent on dirt that pays nothing. This is the tax you pay before the mine lets you in. Then add the real burn rate. Excavators don't sip diesel. They drink it. Pumps wear their bearings thin. Belts decide to explode only when the pile looks perfect. Every moving part is a silent timer clicking toward downtime. Payroll never sleeps, and the weather negotiates with no one. A claim like this demands a machine that can turn volume into possibility. That's where the wash plant becomes less of a tool and more of a strategy. Enter the new centerpiece, a plant built for aggression, designed to convert hills of pay into a river of concentrate without flinching. This wasn't a cosmetic upgrade. It was an admission that Dominion would only cooperate if fed by industrial hunger. The math is heartless. Strip enough overburden to expose the ribbon of pay, load rock trucks until the road becomes a groove, flood the hopper, keep the screens clean, and let gravity do the heavy lifting. If the plant outruns the fuel bills and the crew outruns the breakdowns, the number inches upward. If anything drifts, the number stalls. That's why the down days feel so heavy on a place like this. The ledger continues to tick while the plant sits still. There's another layer to the math: timing. The thaw gives a window, and that window closes whether you hit your target or not. This season, timing was the shadow over every conversation, every shift change, every decision to push harder when the ground pushed back. The only way through was to build speed, not recklessness, but disciplined speed, so ounces hit the tray fast enough to pay today's bills and tomorrow's ambition. And none of that works without the one force bigger than diesel: people who refuse to quit when the wind cuts and the mud swallows boots. Iron is predictable. People are complicated. Dominion demanded both. The shift board might say 12 hours, but the real number is whatever the situation requires. If a pump loses prime at midnight, the shift doesn't end. The problem ends, and then you breathe. The most important resource on a site like this is not a piece of equipment. It's a crew that believes the target is worth the pain. That belief gets tested when the thermometer dips, when the cut looks stingy, when a belt chews itself into ribbons after a perfect morning. Leadership shows up differently under that load. It's not a speech. It's 100 small decisions that signal what matters. Safety first, production always, and people never reduced to headcount. When a foreman translates a plan into clean passes, that's leadership. When a mechanic preps a spare before the original fails, that's leadership. When an operator takes the time to cut a clean floor so trucks stop breaking springs, that's leadership. It's a culture of ownership, and it becomes visible in the little efficiencies that add up by the ton. This season showcased that culture. The crew adapted to a larger, faster plan without losing discipline. They got ahead of the breakdowns that could have snowballed. They turned maintenance into rhythm instead of reaction, and they leaned into a simple understanding. On a claim this expensive, you don't work hard. You work smart first, then hard forever. That is how a team survives long nights, short tempers, and a scoreboard that sometimes refuses to blink. There's a human truth here that outsiders miss. Money keeps people, but respect is why they push past comfort. When everyone knows their effort is seen, the site runs different. Communication gets sharper. Mistakes get corrected faster. The line between roles blurs in the best way. Operators learn maintenance. Mechanics learn to read the cut. Foremen learn who needs a break before the break becomes a problem. That's how you turn a crew into an engine. Once the engine is humming, the plant can finally sing. And that's when the ounces start to tell the story the map only hinted at. If you've never stood near a wash plant that's truly dialed, imagine thunder with a heartbeat. The process looks simple on paper and merciless in practice. Excavators peel the pay from that narrow window below the overburden cap. Trucks cycle without drama, because drama wastes fuel. At the hopper, high-pressure cannons break stubborn clumps into a moving river. That river rides vibrating screens that toss the wrong-sized rock aside and push the right-sized gravel forward. In the sluice boxes, miner's moss waits like a net. Gold is heavy. It settles. Lighter material flows on, like it never mattered. A season like this doesn't survive with one good week. It needs a stack of good weeks separated by problems that never become disasters. That's where multiple plants earn their keep. With a trio of workhorses, each with its own strengths, the site spreads the risk. If one plant hiccups, another buys time. When all three are humming, the scoreboard looks like a climb instead of a scramble. The weekly weigh-ins become a roll call of contributions. This plant carried when that one limped. That plant broke records when the cut finally ran like a vein instead of a rumor. The crew learned each plant's personality. One preferred steady feed and hated surprises. Another ate surges and punished hesitation. Keeping screens clean, keeping water flow balanced, keeping mats from loading unevenly. All of it rarely makes the highlight reel, but it's the difference between an okay cleanup and a season-defining run. And the better the crew understood those nuances, the more the plants paid back. There's also the quiet discipline of tailings and waste. Every rock that doesn't belong in the sluice still has to go somewhere. And if that somewhere blocks the next pass, you just burned tomorrow to save 5 minutes now. This crew treated waste like chess, not checkers. Piling where it opened up future movement, not where it was convenient. That matters, because time matters. And the clock at Dominion never stopped. All of this momentum funnels into a single room, where the noise fades and the numbers decide whether the season writes its own legend. The gold room reduces chaos to arithmetic. Mats come out heavy. Concentrates wash down to a tight stream. The shaker table separates bright from dark, a thin golden line growing thicker with every pass. Then there's the ritual of drying and weighing, calm hands, steady scoops, digits climbing. Outside, the crew waits in the kind of silence that only happens when people have given everything and have nothing left to control. That's the moment a season compresses into a number. Breaking through the target, 7,000 ounces, didn't happen by accident. It happened because the best weeks landed when they were needed most. The final push was the culmination of months of mistakes corrected, patterns learned, and processes hardened. When the ounces jumped faster than expected, you could feel the pressure leaving the room without anyone saying a word. Numbers don't get nervous, but people do. And this number told everyone that the work had met the wager. Pushing beyond the line into the mid-7,000 range reset the narrative from survival to vindication. That kind of total doesn't just balance books, it redefines them. The weekly cleanups stop feeling like isolated wins and start reading like a plan that finally showed its shape. A season that began as an all-in role now looked like a meticulously executed campaign. And that's the real reveal. The ounces are proof, not drama. They proved the stripping wasn't wasteful. They proved the fuel burn was leverage, not loss. They proved the decision to scale was not a gamble dressed as ambition, but ambition served by preparation. What outsiders call luck is usually the moment preparation becomes visible. In the gold room, visibility arrives 1 ounce at a time. A big cleanup isn't just a spike on a chart. It's the physical result of every time a mechanic beat a failure by an hour, every time an operator kept a floor from sponging up time, every time a foreman adjusted feed instead of complaining about grade. The scale doesn't care about intention. It cares about execution. This season delivered execution in bulk. And the second the jars settled, another conversation started. One that tried to decode how the impossible suddenly looked inevitable. Fans love a mystery, and a season like this breeds theories. The first says the risk was real but calculated to the decimal. That drilling, testing, and mapping gave a much clearer picture than the tension on screen suggested. In that view, the season's will they or won't they wasn't fakery. It was the way pressure looks, even when you're playing a strong hand. A second line of thinking points to legacy. The habits forged under a mentor, the long shadow of a family name, and the internal promise not to let that standard slip. Those forces can keep a crew pushing when the easier answer is to blame the ground. A third perspective frames the entire season as an exercise in leadership at scale. The idea is simple. This wasn't a miner rolling dice. This was a builder running a plan. Logistics tight, maintenance proactive, scheduling ruthless, and emotions kept off the controls. None of these views cancel the others. In reality, the win likely sits where they overlap. Smart drilling and good data give you confidence. Legacy gives you fuel when confidence wobbles. Leadership turns both into consistent output. Call it the triangle of advantage: the plan, the purpose, and the people. Dominion rewarded the operation that aligned all three and punished every moment the alignment slipped. That's why the season felt like a war of attrition with brief bursts of glory. What matters for viewers trying to separate hype from substance is this: luck does not sustain a production curve. It can change a week. It cannot carry a season. A claim that heavy requires systems, repetition without sloppiness, speed without panic. The reason this win feels convincing is because you can trace the line from strip work to feed rate to cleanup without finding the usual gaps. When the pieces click for that long, the result stops looking like surprise and starts looking like confirmation. And once the debate cooled, one truth stayed obvious. The crew didn't win because everything went right. They won because everything went wrong in ways they were prepared to fix. It's tempting to view a record season as a miracle. It's almost always a staircase. The first steps began years earlier, when a young operator decided to carve his own lane rather than live forever in the glow of someone else's legend. Early wins proved the instinct was real. Rivalries sharpened focus. Systems replaced improvisation. The operation learned to hold pressure without leaking performance. By the time Scribner matured into a reliable engine, the team understood cadence, not just effort. How to plan a strip a week earlier than instinct. How to stock a part a month before failure. How to turn a crew change into momentum instead of a stall. That discipline is how you graduate from good weeks to good seasons. It's also how you develop the confidence to stare at a price tag that would spook most outfits and call it the cost of the next chapter. Dominion wasn't a new story. It was the latest version of the same lesson. Scale is earned. Every ounce at Scribner wrote a line in the manual. Every breakdown on smaller plants taught a move that would later save days on a bigger site. Every time the crew rallied around a tight deadline taught leadership how to allocate pain without burning people out. So when this season demanded everything at once, capital, crew, courage, the operation had already rehearsed the rhythms. That's why the toughest stretches didn't break the arc. An early string of maintenance headaches turned into process fixes. A tight window on weather turned into a firmer schedule with less wiggle room for error. Even the psychological load was familiar. People had already learned how to show up when the scoreboard looked unfriendly. The result is what you see in the final total. Not an outlier, but a culmination. The best part about a staircase is that once you've climbed to a new landing, you own the view. The knowledge doesn't vanish when the snow comes. It waits. It takes shape as preseason plans, smarter drill programs, better spare strategies, and training that turns rookies into assets faster. The next season doesn't start at zero. It starts with a playbook that has proven it can carry a number that used to feel impossible. But success brings a different pressure. The pressure to prove it wasn't a one-off. And that's where the future raises the difficulty again. The cork pop is the loudest second of the year and the least important. The real sound is the checklist for what comes next. Big seasons reset expectations. They also reset the baseline of what failure would look like. With a claim like Dominion, the horizon is measured in years, not weeks. That means license timelines, average ounce targets, and capital plans that keep the fleet fresh instead of nursing iron past its useful life. The next move is not about chasing a headline number. It's about building a repeatable machine that treats 10,000 ounces as a habit, not a miracle. That starts with stripping smarter. The fastest ounce is the one you planned a month ago. Getting ahead of the cut protects feed rate when weather turns sideways. It means drilling with intention so the pit goes where the geology says yes, not where the road looks convenient. It means scheduling so the ugliest maintenance lands when you can afford the downtime, not when the plant is begging to run. And it means keeping the culture that made the last season possible. Direct communication, no passengers, and a refusal to let fatigue write the plan. Risk doesn't vanish after a record. It just changes shape. Commodity prices wiggle. Fuel spikes. Parts back order. Weather shortens the window by a week when you needed 2. The advantage now is experience under load. A team that has already handled a season this dense has fewer surprises left. They know what failure sounds like 5 minutes before it arrives, and they know how to pull it out by the roots instead of taping around it. That is the unseen dividend of a year like this one. In the bigger picture, this is the turning point where an operation stops being defined by a single win and starts being measured by consistency. If Dominion becomes a platform instead of a headline, the story shifts from recovery to expansion, from proving the purchase to leveraging it. That's the frontier ahead. Not just stacking ounces, but building a system that forces ounces to show up on schedule. And that's the part that keeps viewers locked in. It isn't just the glint of gold in a pan. It's the choreography of chaos into order. It's the knowledge that when the new season starts, the clock will be cruel again, the ground will be stubborn again, and the crew will shoulder up and try to bend both to their will again. The legend of a 15-millimeter season isn't the number, it's the refusal to let that number own you. The win is real. The work doesn't end.